Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. It's all about cover-ups this morning. The first part of the government's COVID Plan B to limit the spread of Omicron comes into force in England today, including the mandatory wearing of face masks in more indoor venues. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's under increasing pressure from his own MPs, angry at the new restrictions and, of course, the ongoing row over Christmas party claims and the refurbishment of his number 10 flat. Also ahead. Heading off on a new mission, we'll be speaking to the British astronaut Tim Peake about inspiring school children to do their science homework.
This is Samantha. I think she was about 10 months old. And it's a delightful picture, and it's black and white, and I love black and white.
And we'll hear from the journalist travelling the country to record people's life stories after losing his own father during the pandemic. It's Friday, the 10th of December. Facing up to Plan B in the fight against COVID, masks now have to be worn in more indoor settings in England.
It is a drinking venue as well, and it's very hard to police, especially during a show, in darkness, without interrupting the customer, but also the show itself.
The hospitality industry says customers will be put off as the government scientist describes the restrictions as a necessary evil.
PM under pressure, the Tory backbench rebellion against Boris Johnson's Plan B as he faces a series of allegations. Quarantine quarrel, the travellers furious at the cost and condition at the state of hotel accommodation.
We are treated like prisoners, like animals. The number of guards is disproportionate to the risk.
Guilty, the actor Jussie Smollett is convicted of staging a racist, homophobic attack on himself in what prosecutors say was a bid to bolster his career.
I thought the evidence was overwhelming that, in fact, Mr. Smollett had faked a hate crime and then lied to the police about it.
Unaware of the tragedy, rapper Travis Scott says he had no idea that 10 people had been killed in a crash at his music festival in Texas.
Even after the show, you just kind of hearing things, but you don't know. I didn't know the exact details until, minutes before the press conference.
The weather cold and windy with a mix of sunshine and showers. Hello, good morning. Face masks must be worn in more settings, including cinemas, theatres and churches, as measures are tightened in England. It's in a bid to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. It's the first stage of the government's move to so-called Plan B COVID restrictions. Well, under today's changes, face masks will be required in more public settings, including theatres and cinemas. Masks will not be needed in pubs or restaurants. From Monday, people will be asked to work from home where possible. From Wednesday, the NHS COVID pass will also be required for visitors to nightclubs, indoor unseated venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any event with more than 10,000 people. Officials in Scotland have gone further, though. Public Health Scotland is calling for all Christmas parties to be cancelled. Sky's Milena Veselinovic reports.
These theatre-goers were among the last to enjoy a performance unmasked in England. Face coverings are now compulsory in most indoor venues, but those who run them say enforcing the rules will be a challenge.
It is a drinking venue as well, and it's very hard to police, especially during a show, in darkness, without interrupting the customer, but also the show itself. People who are coming out want to have a good time, and trying to tell a group of people that potentially had a few drinks during the day that they have to wear their mask, it is definitely a flashpoint on the doors.
News of restrictions has already hit business in this theatre.
All right, okay, so we're about 20% down on what we were supposed to have.
And while masks won't be needed in pubs or restaurants, advice to work from home could cut their income too.
Well, it's still really busy here, but the fear is that once the work from home mandate kicks in, fewer people will be inclined to go out for spontaneous drinks or dinner, hurting the hospitality industry just as it was starting to recover. Reduced footfall is bad news for those catering to office workers.
Telling people to stay at home is going to have a massive impact on city centre businesses, many of whom have suffered a torrid 18 months, are only just getting back on their feet right now, so really concerning to see.
From Wednesday, these fans will have to show vaccine passports or a negative lateral flow test for a big match like this one. On that, opinions are divided.
I'm double vaxxed, so I'm happy to. No.
Not a problem for you?
No, not a problem for me.
How about yourself?
I am double vaxxed. I have got a vaccine passport, so I'm okay. I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable with it.
It's a breach of human rights. You should be able to decide whether or not you get vaccinated. We've given our money to West Ham United, so they've got our money already. So you're now saying that my son can't enjoy football just because he hasn't been vaccinated.
Restrictions are never good for business, but the government hopes they will curb Omicron enough to avoid more stringent measures in the future. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
Well, Charlotte Lomas is in central London for us now. Charlotte, good morning to you. What's the reaction then from business this morning?
Good morning, Vanessa. Well, yes, we're here in Trafalgar Square in the centre of London, just in front of St Martin in the Fields Church. We've obviously got the National Gallery within walking distance and surrounded by theatres. And you have to be inside all of these places. As of today, you'll have to wear a face mask if you go inside them. And it's already obviously been a mandate and legal requirement since end of November to wear a face mask in shops and on public transport. And now, in the majority of indoor settings, if you want to visit them, you'll have to wear a face mask. And really, as you were hearing in the report, lots of businesses are concerned about the tightening of restrictions. But many people that I've been talking to over the last couple of days have said this really is necessary and the right thing to do in order to try and stop the rapid spread of Omicron. As of yesterday, there was 817 confirmed cases, and there has been warnings from the Health Secretary that this could rise to 1 million cases by the end of this month. So the government really want to try and slow down that spread and allow more time for people to get vaccinated, to get their booster jab, and to really try and get the highest level of protection available to try and slow down and stop the impact of Omicron.
Charlotte, thank you. And just some breaking news for you this morning. The latest GDP figures have just been released. They show output grew by just 0.1% in October. It remains 0.5% below pre-pandemic levels. Well, Surin Thuru, Head of Economics at the British Chambers of Commerce, joins me now. Thanks for your time this morning here on Sky News. You've seen the figures. Were they what you were expecting?
And they're probably a bit weaker than we expected. And what was quite interesting about data, because this is data for October, so it hasn't really got the impact of the new variant in the data. And what we've seen is the actual downward pressure on activity in the month was actually driven by other headwinds, particularly around supply chain disruption, which impacted output in manufacturing and construction sectors.
Looking at what's coming into force today with Plan B, how concerned are you and your members about the working from home restrictions that's coming into place, and also as we approach the festive period too?
Yeah, certainly. While these new measures are less restricted than what we've seen previous, our concern is what the impact these new measures will have on consumer behaviour. Now, we've already seen over recent weeks, because of the new variant, less people going to restaurants, Christmas parties being cancelled. The concern is with these new measures, such as working from home, is that the retail footfall in key areas in retail hospitality, particularly in city centres, is going to fall. And that's, of course, and this is during a real key period for those sectors, because the Christmas period is where they make a lot of their revenue for ahead of the quieter months, the next couple of months.
So with that being said, I'd like to get your views then. Do you support the tightening of restrictions? Because government's obviously moving to Plan B. Many Tory MPs are against this move, planning to vote against it next week.
Well, what we'd like to see is the restrictions are one thing, but what we'd like to see alongside those is actual support for those businesses that will be impacted by those restrictions. So more support for retail and hospitality. This could include, for example, reinstating the 5% VAT rate for these businesses to help them through what's going to be a difficult trading period over the next couple of months.
So as we approach Christmas, then we have had the issue with supply chain problems that we saw a few weeks ago. As we approach Christmas, can you just give us an update on the supply chain disruption that's still facing the UK?
We are still hearing quite significant issues around supply chain disruption, and this is very much broad-based across the economy. And we're hearing issues again with driver shortages, which is impacting and getting goods onto shelves and into factories. So that's clearly having an impact. And what we're also seeing is the impact of staff shortages as well. So there's a number of headwinds facing the UK economy. There's supply chain disruption, there's staff shortages, and of course there's new variants as well. So it's going to be a difficult few months for the UK economy.
And the Scottish Government has strongly urged people to defer Christmas parties. What does this messaging do to business, do you like? Because throughout this pandemic, aside from right at the beginning, we've had so many conflicting messages, haven't we, between the nations? What impact is this having on business?
Well, a lot of this sort of mixed messaging has created greater uncertainty, not only what happens now, but also what happens in the future. But what's also concerning for a lot of businesses is that they've had little time to adapt to the new changes. And this has been a constant theme through the pandemic. So that's created more costs and more concern for a lot of businesses across the UK, particularly at a critical trading period for those in retail and hospitality.
And also, your outlook on GDP growth was published before Plan B, of course, but was already projected to slow down more than expected. So how will you revise it now?
Well, it's likely to be revised further down. We did have quite a significant impact from the new variant, but it's likely to be revised a bit more over that period because one of the key drivers of the UK economy is consumer spending. That's critical at this time of year, given the run-up to Christmas. And what we're likely to see is consumers become more reluctant to socialise and spend, and that's going to have an impact on the wider UK economy.
Sirin Thoreau, thanks for your time. Still to come on the show, as the government wins the latest legal challenge against COVID quarantine restrictions, we'll be speaking to the legal team trying to overturn the current rules. As tougher restrictions for theatre audiences come into force, we'll speak to the boss of the West End's biggest venues. Will the lockdown measures taken up so far stop the spread of Omicron? We'll talk to a leading epidemiologist just after 8 o'clock. Now, there's still intense pressure on the Prime Minister this morning as he faces a number of tricky questions. It's understood that Mr Johnson's most senior communications advisor gave a speech to staff and handed out awards on the night of the alleged Downing Street party last year. Jack Doyle oversees the communications strategy, which has seen Number 10 deny that any party has taken place. Well, the investigation into claims of illegal gatherings in Westminster last Christmas has been widened. The Cabinet Office will look at claims that a leaving party was held in Downing Street on November the 27th, 2020. It's alleged Mr Johnson himself gave a speech at an informal drinks evening. The second to be looked at will be a party at the Department of Education. Officials have admitted there was an event for staff on December the 10th last year. And the investigation will also look into claims of a Christmas party in Number 10 on the 18th of December last year. It's reported there was food, drinks and games at the gathering, which lasted until after midnight. Meanwhile, Labour has accused Mr Johnson of lying to his standards advisor over the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. Angela Rayner says the Prime Minister misled Lord Gates by saying he did not know who was behind the funding of the work. Well, the Prime Minister's problems dominate this morning's front pages. Let's start with the Daily Telegraph then. It understands that the Prime Minister's advisor on standards may resign over allegations he was misled about who paid for refurbishments to Boris and Carrie Johnson's flats. The story is also on the front page of The Guardian, which says Mr Johnson is accused of misleading the watchdog. The Metro newspaper suggests that the birth of the Johnsons' new baby takes the Prime Minister out of the firing line for now. But the Eye indicates that the reprieve May not last long, though, with Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss said to be considering leadership challenges against Mr Johnson. The Daily Mail says that the Prime Minister could face a backbench revolt. It claims up to 50 Conservative MPs could vote against new restrictions. And the Times reports that the Conservative Party have slumped to their worst poll ratings in 11 months as the Prime Minister battles on several fronts. Let's take a look then at the latest daily COVID data. And there have been 50,867 new cases of COVID-19 recorded in the latest 24-hour period. Another 148 deaths have been reported within 28 days of a positive test. So that brings the total number of deaths in the UK to 146,135. To the vaccine rollouts now, and 21,700 people received their first dose of the vaccine, while 29,437 people received their second. So what this means is that the total number of people to have received their second dose is over 46.6 million. And 414,645 booster and third jabs were given in the latest 24-hour period, taking the total number of those doses to more than 21.7 million. In other news, and the actor Jussie Smollett has been convicted of staging a hate crime against himself. Prosecutors in Chicago say that it was part of an attempt to gain sympathy and bolster his career. Our US correspondent Greg Milam reports.
This was Jussie Smollett with a noose around his neck on the night he says he suffered a racist and homophobic attack. Nearly 3 years later, he arrived at court to hear a jury decide that the attack was a hoax, staged by Smollett himself.
Mr. Smollett, what's your hope for the verdict here?
Guilty of making false reports to police, he could face 3 years in prison. Brothers Abimbola and Olabinjo Osendero told the trial they were recruited by Smollett and paid to buy supplies for the attack. They said he wanted them to rough him up and shout slurs which made them appear to be supporters of then-President Donald Trump, all in front of security cameras. The prosecutor accused Smollett of harming the cause of the real victims of hate crimes.
I told the jury that I thought the evidence was overwhelming, that in fact Mr. Smollett had faked a hate crime and then lied to the police about it, and then compounded his crimes by lying to the jury during the course of this trial and insulting their intelligence.
Throughout the trial, Smollett had continued to claim that there was no hoax and that he was the real victim.
We remain 100% confident in our client's innocence. From the first day of this case, his case has been prejudged, his case has been tried in the media, and it's unfortunate. This is the United States of America. We live in a constitutional democracy where everyone is presumed innocent. But obviously, if we're being honest, that hasn't been the case.
When the hoax was discovered, police said Smollett had used the pain and anger of racism to further his career. Ultimately, he lost his role in the show Empire and told jurors he'd lost his livelihood as well.
Did you lie on the stand?
When he's sentenced in the new year, he could also lose his liberty. Greg Milam, Sky News, Los Angeles.
Now, also making the news this morning, American rap star Travis Scott says he was unaware that people had died at his music festival in Texas until after he performed. 10 people were killed during a stampede at the event in Houston last month. In his first interview since the accidents, the rapper told Charlemagne the God's YouTube channel that he had been an emotional roller coaster.
Even after the show, you know, you're just kind of hearing things, but you don't know. I didn't know the exact details until, you know, minutes before the press conference.
Mm-hmm.
And even at that moment, you kind of just like, wait, you know, what? The thing is, like, you know, people pass out, you know, people, you know, things happen at concerts, but something like that, it's just like.
At least 54 people have been killed and another 105 injured after a lorry packed with people crashed into a pedestrian bridge in southern Mexico. Officials say the victims appeared to be migrants from Central America, though their nationalities have yet to be confirmed. Local authorities said that those responsible for the accidents and migrant trafficking will be held to account. A Royal Navy serviceman has been found dead at the naval base, which is home to the UK's nuclear submarine fleet. Police say the death at the high security site in Argyll and Boots is so far unexplained. Now, he's probably had a sleepless night after the arrival of his new daughter, but there is plenty of other problems for Boris Johnson to be worrying about, certainly to keep him awake, isn't it? As well as claims of illegal parties in Downing Street, there's the allegation that he misled an investigation into the refurbishment of his flat at 10 Downing Street. Plus, he's facing a growing rebellion from his own backbenchers over those new COVID restrictions. Well, joining me now is Tom Peck, parliamentary sketch writer and columnist at The Independent. Tom, what a week for Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, it's epic, really, isn't it? I mean, one forgets he began this week standing in the dark before dawn, dressed up as a police officer to launch Crime Week. And within a few hours, effectively, his entire staff are accused of committing a crime within his own house, which he denies happened. There's also, we almost forget the fact that he is a Foreign Office whistleblower suggests that capacity was used to evacuate dogs before people from Afghanistan. His advisor has only been in the job for a year because after the last one quit over the Priti Patel bullying allegations, looks like he's going to quit because effectively he believes he's been lied to. It doesn't really end, does it? He's had a lot of terrible, terrible, terrible weeks, but none quite as terrible as this one, baby notwithstanding.
Absolutely, and even with the arrival of the baby, as some of the papers are suggesting, he will get a bit of a reprieve, but only for now, because this story will continue, wouldn't it? Obviously, what we're discussing in terms of the partying, Christmas parties, flat refurbishment, the revolt next week that he's looking ahead to. So next week is going to be an interesting week for him, isn't he? We've also got, of course, the elections that's coming up following the resignation of Owen Paterson. So more to come next week, Prime Minister.
Yeah, as you said, a by-election next week, and a by-election caused effectively by his own attempt to see off the Standards Commissioner, largely to prevent her doing an investigation into him. And he'd handled that so badly that he now has a by-election which he's probably going to lose. He's one of his senior advisors, as you will know, Allegra Stratton, resigned yesterday or the day before. And that's really a problem because she effectively resigned because she made a joke about a party that she quite probably wasn't at. Now, she's resigned because she made a joke about it. There were 50 people or so who are actually at it, including, it now seems, his own Director of Communications, Jack Doyle. He's been spending the last week telling all of his team to deny the existence of a party that he almost certainly attended. So how many of those guys are going to have to resign when one of them's resigned for joking about the thing that they actually did? I wouldn't like to be in their shoes either. So there is plenty more gunpowder to go off, if you like, and I can't see how it isn't going to go off either.
There'll be many sacrificial lambs in this, wouldn't there? And I'm interested to pick up on what you just said. You think that he's going to lose that by-election then, do you? Because Boris Johnson has been holding his own for quite some time, despite any allegations of sleaze that has followed him in the last months.
Well, one makes predictions in by-elections at grave risk these days. The only thing that tends to happen is the most unlikely event tends to be the one that does happen. I think if the Lib Dems, when they pulled off that remarkable win in Cheshire and Amersham, and I know that privately they're quite confident in North Shropshire and the Conservatives are pretty terrified, to the extent that some of them are privately conceding that it's already lost. When it gets to that stage, it probably is lost, but, we've all been wrong before.
And, of course, we had Old Bexley and Sidcup, didn't we, as well, and they managed to take that as well. Let's just talk about the Met Police, their decision not to investigate. Is it a case that they're saying that there isn't any evidence? Is it a case that they're just probably not looking hard enough? Because this is one of the most, monitored buildings, I imagine, number 10. Police are standing outside for crying out loud. There must be endless CCTV.
Well, they have a policy in existence, which is not to retrospectively investigate previous COVID breaches. That is a real policy, and they're arguably, in their view, it would be unfair to break it purely because this is a high-profile case. But then at the same time, Boris Johnson was dressed up as a police officer on Monday. He knows very well that the way this country works, the way the police service works in this country is policing by consent. There are more market forces at play. I don't really think there is anybody in the country who wouldn't think that this case is high profile enough, important enough, and the police's own reputation at stake enough to potentially look again at whether this rule should necessarily apply to it. It's extremely serious. And to a certain extent, what is at stake is all of the people, or the entire population's willingness to comply with new regulations that have been brought in this week, to a certain extent rests on whether or not this breach was taken seriously. So arguably, the police should think again about whether or not that rule should apply in this very, 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 very important case.
Tom, thanks for your time this morning.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Well, let's check in on the weather now, shall we? Against the government's latest quarantine restrictions. Now, campaigners try to overturn the requirement for travellers from 11 countries to spend 10 days in an official hotel, regardless of their vaccination status. They say conditions in the hotels are too expensive and amount to a breach of human rights. Now, people forced to stay in quarantine hotels have told Sky News that they're being held in terrible conditions and treated like prisoners. A High Court judge has blocked a legal challenge to the government's hotel quarantine system for people returning from red list destinations. But some of those we spoke to said that there was no choice of food and that they were banned from using their phones. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury has this report.
This is not a prison yard. It's the car park of a quarantine hotel. The video was shot by Sven Huesen, who is staying here after returning from South Africa this month.
It's extremely stressful. We are treated like prisoners, like animals. The number of guards is disproportionate to the risk that is actually here.
Over 200,000 people like Sven have had to quarantine in hotels upon travelling to the UK from countries on the red list. It costs more than £2,000 each and comes with some strict rules.
We are allowed to speak to the media, but we are not allowed to take any photographs. We're not allowed to film. Today, I was aggressively told to put my telephone away, to not film, not take photographs.
When the fire alarm was set off at Ella's hotel, she said chaos ensued. She and her toddler are at a hotel near Gatwick Airport. She says quarantining at home in Wilmslow would have been much easier for her 2-year-old son.
We need to be going outside with him. We're allowed 20 minutes outside a day if we're lucky. Secondly, the food choices. There is no choice for children. It is only what they get delivered and that's it. So there's no option of what to give them. If it wasn't for my sister living nearby, she lives about an hour away, and dropping me up some food for him, he would go hungry.
Now, lawyers representing 1,000 travellers said they would appeal a judicial review decision on the matter. They argue that mandatory hotel quarantine for fully vaccinated people is unlawful and an interference with the right to personal liberty.
We're willing to take it as far as we need to go. So if we're unsuccessful at the Court of Appeal, then we'll go to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and it has impacted, as I say, so many people. We're going to continue fighting it.
In a statement, the government told Sky News, "We have taken precautionary and temporary action at the border to help slow down the seeding of the Omicron variant in the UK from abroad, buying time for our scientists to learn more about the variant." A petition for people to self-isolate at home has had more than 100,000 signatures and is due to be debated in Parliament in January. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in Cheshire.
Well, joining me live now is Tom Goodhead. You saw in that piece, whose company lost that legal challenge against hotel quarantine yesterday. And also joined by another guest, but actually we'll be speaking to a few other people too, Tom. But firstly, let's just stay with you. As we were just saying there, you've lost that legal challenge, that judicial review. Will you be appealing?
We are, yes. We're appealing in the next 7 days. We were extremely disappointed with the judgment yesterday. We're grateful, obviously, to the judge for considering the arguments that we made on behalf of our clients, but I was extremely disappointed by the outcome, and I think it was the wrong decision.
Just remind us, what was the basis of your argument in the first place?
Yeah, so the legal challenge is that this breaches Article 5 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is the right to liberty, so the right to your personal freedoms, not to be detained by the states. You've heard many of the people that we represent and people that have just featured on your programme now have described these conditions as being prison-like. And I think the best way to put it is that. I mean, it's a slightly more luxurious version of prison. It's perhaps maybe what people perceive prison to be like if you believe that people are soft on crime. But the reality is that the state takes control of nearly every single facet of your everyday life whilst you're in detention. I mean, that is prison. There's no other way to describe it.
Now, has it come as a surprise to you that the Prime Minister has admitted that you have a very fair challenge?
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, yesterday, the government had 2 lawyers in court saying that this was unarguable. Yet on Wednesday evening, the Prime Minister describes it as a very fair challenge. That probably tells you all you need to know about the state of the government's thinking at the moment in relation to this issue.
Well, that really shows you, just how conflicting many things are, isn't it, during this pandemic, especially we're hearing one thing from the government and one thing from others. Now, is there a good chance then that, this result could end in quarantine hotels?
I mean, I get the feeling that politically, and it's starting to come towards an end now anyway, I think the public mood has changed. Very sadly, a lot of this is about politics. I don't believe that the policy was ever really grounded in science. I think it was a perception of not having acted hard enough during bringing travel restrictions in at the beginning of the first lockdown or when the pandemic started, and then a need to try and show that the UK was being tougher than pretty much any other government in Europe. And in fact, now worldwide, even Australia is no longer pursuing this policy. Sadly, as with many things with this government, I think it's politics rather than anything informed by science or informed by law.
Tom Goodhead, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's speak now to Emily Menny and Owen Hancock, who are currently in a hotel quarantine, having arrived back from South Africa. Good morning to you both. Just tell us about your experiences so far.
Well, our experience has been very frustrating and very challenging. We were away visiting Emily's family, who we haven't seen in 2.5 years because we were waiting for South Africa to go on the green list. When we were there, the rug was pulled from underneath us, saying if we want to come home, we have to do this enforced imprisonment, and that has to come at a cost of nearly £4,000 for us. And it's been equally frustrating once we've arrived back in the UK.
And some people have talked about the conditions there in terms of the food and the treatment. How have you been finding it?
We think it's just really frustrating. Like, if we were able to quarantine at home, we could, eat what we want to eat. We'd be able to kind of, make our own food. We haven't actually been able to go out for any exercise. We've requested it, but just no one has come to our door. So I think we really are backing PGMBM's appeal in the courts, and we just think it is totally unfair, unreasonable and unacceptable that we are double vaccinated, travelled when we were allowed to travel, followed all the rules, and clearly the Prime Minister and his number 10 Downing Street staff do not follow the same rules that we are supposed to.
And that's exactly, actually, I was going to touch on that. So obviously we're hearing the revelations of potential parties, illegal parties that took place. And then we have the likes of you who are following the rules. So how does that make you feel that the rule makers are also the rule breakers, potentially?
It's absolutely disgusting, and I think it shows just how ill thought through some of the policies are. For from this government. We, when hotel quarantine was imposed, they cancelled all the flights back to the UK from South Africa. So we then had to go later. When we booked on our flight, the hotel quarantine wasn't available to us. So then we had to move our flights again. And it's just, it makes your blood boil, doesn't it? To know that you're doing all of this, trying to be so diligent with your travel plans to see your family members. And then the government itself can't even be bothered to stick to their own rules.
I'd also just like to add on to that. We've started a petition on change.org and we've got about 60,000 signatures in just over a week. So there are so many people that are in exactly the same situation as us. And we're just trying, to help everyone kind of get out of this imprisonment that we have to pay, so much money for.
Emily, thank you. Emily, Menny and Owen Hancock, thanks for your time. Well, time now to take a look at what's happening in the world of sport now. And Jackie is here for us. Jackie, what's happening?
Whoa, calm down, Johnny. It's only a game.
Brought to you by Vitality, sharing the benefits of healthy living.
Good morning. Well, what's happening, Vanessa, is England captain Joe Root and Dawid Malan have led the fight back on day 3 of the first Ashes test against Australia at the Gabba, having been tasked with wiping out a 278-run deficit. They now trail by just 58 runs at stumps. Resuming on 343 for 7, Australia continued to build a commanding lead. Travis Head brought up 150 from just 143 balls after hitting the 3rd fastest century in Ashes history. Australia added 82 this morning to grow their lead from 196 to 278 as they were eventually all out for a massive 425. Now, in reply, England's second innings was not off to a great start. Rory Burns managed to avoid another duck, but was out for just 13 here, caught behind by Alex Carey. The wicket of his opening partner, Hasib Hamid, followed soon after. He fell for 27, also caught behind by Carey. But Captain Root and Malan have given England hope with a solid partnership and some superb batting. Root putting his first innings duck behind him to pass 50 from 80 balls for his 51st Test half-century. He now holds the record for the most Test runs in a calendar year by an Englishman. He's also just 2 runs short of his highest Test score in Australia on 86 not out. Malan there as well. Both look to be closing in on centuries. They put on a partnership of 159 runs. And England closed the day 220-2. Now, busy nights in the Europa League with mixed fortunes for the British sides in action last night. Disappointment for Leicester. They drop into the Europa Conference League after a 3-2 defeat to Napoli. West Ham had already booked their place in the knockout stages at the top of Group H. They have had opportunities, rather, for their youngsters in their final game against Dinamo Zagreb, but it was the Croatian side who came out on top. A 1-0 win means they finished second in the group behind the Hammers. Rangers finished second in Group A after a 1-1 draw in Lyon. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side will take on one of the 8 teams to drop out of the Champions League. Celtic boss Ange Postecoglou says there are plenty of positives his side can take despite not making it through to the knockout stages. Celtic finished with a win. It was 3-2 at home to Real Betis last night, but they drop into the Europa Conference League. Now, there is no doubt about the big event this weekend, the climax of this year's Formula One Championship in Abu Dhabi. It all comes down to the last race, with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen level on points with 1 race to go. Hamilton has played down suggestions Verstappen could take him out of the race in order to claim the championship. Hamilton collided with the back of Verstappen's car in last weekend's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and it all adds to what should be a thrilling finale. And coverage of Practice 1 gets underway from 9:30 this morning, live on Sky Sports F1. I'm back in an hour's time. See you then.
Handball. 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 Ref. Handball. Ref.
Jackie, thank you. Coming up on Sky News Breakfast, as tougher restrictions for theatre audiences come into force, we'll be speaking to the boss of the West End's biggest venues.
Put a spell on you. Cause you're mine.
Spell on you. The fragrance. Louis Vuitton.
Say hello to the world's true champion. An enduring hero. A winner. The Epson Eco Tank. Big bottles, less hassle.
Loads of ink. Enough for all of this.
Say goodbye to ink cartridges with Epson Eco Tank.
Just fill and chill.
On a great hair day, I feel that little bit stronger.
My hair won't bring home the title, but feeling unbreakable sure can.
Because the power of hair isn't just how it looks, it's how it makes you feel.
Pantene grows strong with biotin and bamboo for stronger, longer hair.
Awaken your hair
And your power.
Try Pantene Lift and Volume with biotin and rose water. Get fuller, thicker looking hair. Pantene.
Oh, I see you installed an alarm.
Yes, a very sure alarm. It's getting dark so early these days.
How do you like it?
Amazing peace of mind. We activate it every night and when we're out.
Excellent. We should get an alarm.
Verisure alarms and cameras. Install your alarm now and get a free Arlo video doorbell. Call now or start your quote at verisure.co.uk.
Mark's Christmas will be spent on a pavement. John can't remember when he wasn't on the streets. Tessie feels safer here than at home. Please help the Salvation Army bring a homeless person in from the cold by calling 0800 044 8833. Your £19 will help show them someone cares and give them the chance of a fresh start this Christmas. Thank you.
It's their special story when they're in the book. Their picture inside the cover.
Look, I'm in the book.
A story with their name. Bedtime will never be the same.
Look, it's me.
Adventures with their favourites or finding something new. In the book is where their greatest dreams come true. Get 10% off all our children's books this Christmas at inthebook.com.
I've been exploring to find bingo inspiration for me Foxy Fabulous. Me cup of tea. Grab a free prize with me Snow Globe game every day. Hey up! Discover the fun at Foxy Bingo.
Does anyone know which particular parts of your body can be damaged by air pollution?
Friday will start cold and showery with a patchy frost, but eastern Britain will be mainly dry. Ireland, Northern Ireland and Western Britain will see showers through the morning, some heavy with hail and thunder and hill snow possible. Much of eastern Scotland and eastern England will stay dry and sunny. It'll be cold and windy for all. The afternoon will be similar, but the showers will ease going into the evening. Low air pollution levels are expected again, measuring just 2 or 3 on the daily air quality index.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, Sex and the City became famous for both shocking and delighting viewing, with explicit depictions of the lives and sex lives of professional women. And it's been reborn on Sky. Now, in their 50s, Carrie, Miranda and Charlotte are back in Manhattan. Now, there's no Samantha, but despite growing older, the sex is still there. Our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, reports.
When Sex and the City came out in 1998, collective jaws dropped at its frankness. Before then, sex on TV tended to be from a male gaze and was, well, a bit unrealistic. This was 4 single women openly talking about either wanting it or having it. Now, 2 decades later, they're at it again.
If you have good friends in your corner, anything's possible.
To get fans in the mood, in London, tickets to see a pop-up recreation of Carrie's apartment sold out in 24 hours.
The thing about Sex and the City is that at the time it felt incredibly emancipating, and it really was. But if you watch some of those episodes again, there are some questionable issues. The very affluent, almost entirely white circles that they move in, the gay stereotypes, not to mention the occasionally questionable views on sexual consent.
Starring in a one-woman show off Broadway, real-life Carrie Bradshaw Candice Bushnell, whose book the series was based on, says its message wasn't very feminist in the end.
That time was a very unfeminist time. If you remember, there were so many actresses who were saying, I'm not a feminist. So when money is free-flowing, there's less feminism. When money's tighter and women have to work and can't rely on men so much, there's feminism.
As well as a new name, the new series has been given a woke makeover with racially diverse friends, even a non-binary character.
I think that's why it's so important they kind of tread lightly and to make sure that the storyline kind of covers, you know, current times and also is relatable as well, because not just the old fans will be watching, will be introduced to a new range of audiences.
The future is unwritten because we're all at different stages of life.
So what can we expect from this next chapter? Well, while Sex and the City was revolutionary in terms of how young, sexually active women were depicted on TV, don't rule out the reboot doing the same for another group that's rarely represented on screen, women in their 50s.
Hello, lovers.
So hold on to your cosmos. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now, from tonight, theatre and cinema audiences in England will have to mask up when the curtain comes down. But as pantos take on the stage, how will the theatres cope with the restrictions? Well, joining me now, Dame Rosemary Squire, who's Joint Chief Executive of Trafalgar Entertainment. Thanks for your time this morning. As we were just saying, they're all changed for your customers from tonight. How do you feel about having to enforce the mask-wearing rules?
Well, we have been asking our customers to wear their masks. All of our staff, since we reopened fully in July, to make our theatres as safe as possible, all our staff have been wearing masks, you know, front of house, behind the bars, and we have been requesting our customers to wear them, but not enforcing it. Now we're going to, actually, it's a clearer message, they're required to wear masks now. Obviously not when eating or drinking, and obviously kids are exempt. So it's a sensible move, I think one that the industry supports.
And how do you think customers are going to take that?
I think we're all used to it. You know, I think we're now, if you live in London or one of the major cities, we're all used to wearing masks on public transport or on the tube or on buses and in shops. You know, it's a part of life. I'm here in Sydney, actually, opening our new Theatre Hall in Sydney with Jagged Little Pill, fantastic new musical. Our audiences here are in masks, and masks are really more prevalently worn here in Sydney than they are in the UK, pretty well everywhere apart from outdoors. So, you know, we get on with it. People want to come to the theatre. Theatre is open. We have great shows for people to see, for families to come and enjoy this Christmas. You know, pantomime is just as much a part of Christmas as the crackers or the turkey.
How concerned are you about further measures? What would another lockdown do to the industry?
Oh, another lockdown would be devastating. You know, our industry, the USP is that we are live. We can't function at all unless we are live in the moment. And, you know, it was extraordinary, the moments when we reopened fully in July. I was in the theatre at the Barbican watching our Anything Goes preview of it. And the audience were in tears, the cast were in tears, that it meant so much after 18 months of not being able to do their jobs, that there they were with a live audience in the moment telling their stories. It was a wonderful experience. And it's one that, you know, we've grown up with. It's part of what makes us human. We love listening to stories, sharing that experience. And we can't do it unless it's live. So I think all the mental health benefits, all the economic benefits. Creative industries are huge employers, bring billions to our economy, and it would be devastating to be locked down again. But that's not going to happen. We're taking sensible measures, we are wearing our masks, and we're all having a great time in theatre.
And those measures that you're taking, how then does it affect your performers and also the audiences?
Well, performers, since we've come back, we've been unbelievably careful with testing daily, keeping people in COVID-safe bubbles, rehearsing shows in bubbles. Yes, there are some cases, and we've had a few shows have had to lose performances. My company, we've lost a few performances because there's been an outbreak in a company, but mostly not. Mostly we've been performing as normal. It's the exception, a few rare cases that we've lost a show here and there. And I think we're used to doing it, we're very disciplined about it, and we're carrying on so that people can come and enjoy live entertainment and see it safely.
You're remaining optimistic there. Dame Rosemary Squire, thank you.
Thank you.
So what about the weather? Well, let's check in.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, today looks cold with a mix of sunshine and blustery showers, so do grab your brolly. But the weekend will be milder and more unsettled. Now, for now, there are showers around, some heavy and wintry, but much of eastern Britain is dry. And there's just some lingering patchy rain over East Anglia. It's cold, but mostly frost-free. Now, the rain over Norfolk and Suffolk will clear during the morning, leaving eastern England and eastern Scotland largely dry and sunny. Elsewhere, there'll be a mixture of sunshine and blustery showers, some heavy with hail, thunder and hill snow possible, and it will feel cold, especially in the brisk wind.